The Omnivore's Dilemma, Chapter 7. Fat from Corn. Can you eat more, please? Part 2. So, food companies have been very successful at getting us to pay more for the same food. What about their other money making scheme to get us to buy and eat more food than we need? How has that worked out? Well, let's see. 3 of every 5 Americans are overweight. 1 of every 5 is obese. Among kids, it's almost as bad. 17% of kids aged 6 through 19 are obese. This is a giant public health problem, costing the healthcare system an estimated $90 billion a year. The disease, formerly known as adult onset diabetes, has had to be renamed type 2 diabetes since it now occurs so frequently in children, and the Centers for Disease Control estimates that 1 in 3 American children born in 2000 will develop it. Diabetes can mean blindness, amputation, and early death. Because of diabetes and all the other health problems caused by obesity, kids in the U.S. today may turn out to be the first group of Americans with lifespans that are shorter than their parents. To put it simply, Americans are getting fatter and it's killing us. You hear plenty of explanations for our expanding waistline. We sit all day at desks in school or at work, then sit around all night watching television. We play video games instead of sports. Fast food advertising encourages us to eat supersized meals. It is actually cheaper to eat high calorie, fatty, processed foods than whole foods. All these explanations are true, but they don't tell the whole story. Page 93, extra calories. Behind our epidemic of obesity lies this simple fact. When food is abundant and cheap, people will eat more of it. Since 1977, an American's average daily intake of calories has jumped by more than 10%. Since we aren't exercising more, the calories end up being stored away in fat cells in our bodies. Where did all those cheap calories come from? If you've read this far, you already know the answer. Most of them come from cheap corn. Since 1970, farmers in the United States have managed to produce 500 additional calories per person every day. The average person needs about 2,000 calories a day, but that number varies greatly depending on your age, size, and the amount of exercise. Where are those extra calories going? Some are sold overseas. Some are turned into ethanol for our cars, but a lot of them are going into us. An awful lot of those extra corn calories are being eaten as high fructose corn syrup. Not surprisingly, HFCS is the leading source of sweetness in our diet. Page 94, a sweet deal. In 1985, the average American consumed 45 pounds of HFCS a year. In 2006, it was 58 pounds. You might think that it has replaced other sweeteners in the American diet, but that isn't so. In addition to the extra HFCS, Americans are eating more old-fashioned cane sugar too. In fact, since 1985, our consumption of all sugars, cane, beet, HFCS, glucose, honey, maple syrup, whatever, has climbed from 126 pounds to 139 pounds per person. That's what makes HFCS such a sweet deal for the food industry. Since we like sweet things, adding it to our food increases the amount we eat. Read the food labels in your kitchen and you'll find that HFCS is everywhere. It's not just in our soft drinks and snack foods, but in the ketchup and mustard, the breads and cereals, the relishes and crackers, the hot dogs and hams. But it is in soft drinks that we consume most of our 58 pounds of high fructose corn syrup. We can trace this back to the year 1980, an important year in the industry of corn. That was the year corn first became an ingredient in Coca-Cola. By 1984, Coca-Cola and Pepsi had switched over entirely from sugar to high fructose corn syrup. Why? Because HFCS was a few cents cheaper than sugar and consumers couldn't taste the difference. The soft drink makers could have switched one sugar for another. That would not have led us to drink more. But that wasn't all they did. They began to increase the size of a bottle of soda. HFCS was so cheap that Pepsi and Coke could have cut the price of each bottle they sold, but they had a much better idea. They would supersize their sodas. Since corn sweetener was now so cheap, why not get people to pay just a few pennies more for a bigger bottle? Drop the price per ounce, but sell a lot more ounces. Did you ever see an old-fashioned Coke bottle from around 1950? It looks tiny because it only held 8 ounces. Today, the standard size of a Coke or Pepsi is 20 ounces. Supersize. Soda makers don't deserve credit for the invention of supersizing. That belongs to a man named David Wallerstein. In the 1950s, Wallerstein worked for a chain of movie theaters in Texas. Movie theaters make most of their profits from their snack counters, not from ticket sales. It was Wallerstein's job to figure out how to sell more soda and popcorn. Wallerstein tried everything he could think of, but found he simply could not get customers to buy more than one soda and one bag of popcorn. He thought he knew why. Going for seconds makes people feel piggish. Wallerstein discovered that people would buy more popcorn and soda, a lot more, as long as it came in a single giant serving. Thus was born the 2-quart bucket of popcorn and the 64-ounce Big Gulp. In 1968, Wallerstein went to work for McDonald's, but try as he might, he couldn't convince Ray Kroc, the company's founder, to try supersizing. If people want more fries, Kroc told him, they can buy 2 bags. Wallerstein explained that McDonald's customers wanted more but didn't want to buy the second bag. They don't want to look like gluttons. Finally, Kroc gave in and approved supersized portions, and what followed was a dramatic rise in sales. People had been holding back because they didn't want to seem greedy. Now Wallerstein and McDonald's had figured out a way to make them feel okay about eating more. After all, it was still just one serving, even if it was twice the size. They had discovered the secret to expanding the supposedly fixed human stomach. One might think that people would stop eating and drinking these huge portions as soon as they felt full, but it turns out hunger doesn't work that way. Researchers have found that people and animals will eat up to 30% more if they are given larger portions. Our eating habits were formed over millions of years of evolution. Early humans who lived by hunting and gathering didn't always have enough food. Our bodies tell us to eat more when we have the chance because hunger might be just around the corner. The problem is that with the mountain of cheap corn, hunger never comes, at least not for most Americans. In the same way, our built-in instincts tell us to eat lots of sugar and fat. Humans, like most other warm-blooded creatures, have a built-in sweet tooth. The taste of sweet or fat tells our body we're eating an energy-rich food. Our instinct is to eat as much as we can in case we can't find food tomorrow. Yet in nature, we would never find a fruit with anywhere near the amount of fructose in a soda. We would never find a piece of animal flesh with as much fat as a chicken nugget. You begin to see why processing foods is such a good way of getting people to eat more. The fast food chains have been able to build foods that push our evolutionary buttons. Huge amounts of sweets and fats fool our instincts, and we wind up eating much more than we should. Animal experiments prove this is so. Rats presented with solutions of pure sugar or tubs of pure lard will gorge themselves sick. Cheap fat. Surprisingly, the health problems of eating too much hit poor people hardest. That's because if you count the calories, foods loaded with sugar and fat are the cheapest foods in the market. A recent study showed this was true. In a typical supermarket, $1 could buy 1,200 calories of potato chips and cookies. The same dollar could only buy 250 calories of carrots and other whole vegetables. On the beverage aisle, you can buy 875 calories of soda for $1, but $1 will only buy you 170 calories of fruit juice from concentrate. These numbers show why people with limited money to spend on food spend it on the cheapest calories they can find. It makes even more sense when you realize that those cheap calories reward our instincts for fat and sugar. King corn shoved the other plants and animals off the farm. Now it is winning out in the supermarkets too. It is so cheap and comes in so many different forms, the other foods just can't compete. As we have seen, it has had a lot of help. The U.S. government, spending taxpayer dollars, helps pay farmers to grow corn and soybeans, but not to grow carrots. That means the government help pay for your soft drink or cookies, but it won't help pay for green vegetables. One part of the government puts out food pyramids telling you to eat more fruits and vegetables and fewer sweets. Meanwhile, another part of the government is making it cheaper for you to eat more sweets. The government says it wants you to eat healthy, then it makes sure that the cheapest calories in the supermarket are the unhealthiest. Talk about mixed messages. The processed food industry has brought us corn in 1,000 different forms. It's given us cheap corn sweeteners and hundreds of extra calories a day. It's managed to confuse our instincts, to get us to eat more food than we need. All of this is part of a bigger problem, and not a new problem either. It's the problem of figuring out what we should and shouldn't eat. It boils down to this: as creatures who can eat many different things, how do we know what's good to eat and what's not? That's the omnivore's dilemma, and it's growing bigger every day.